The sunlight of Aurelia Prime gleamed off the vast crystal towers, painting the city in shades of gold and silver. From her balcony atop the royal spire, Queen Lyra looked out over the capital, feeling the familiar surge of control and power that came with ruling the Xylar Dominion. Every citizen bowed to her authority, every soldier obeyed her commands, and yet, despite all her victories and strength, she felt a restless curiosity stirring inside her. Today was not like other days. Today, she would meet the human ambassador, Ethan Kane. Humans were an unusual species, fragile and soft compared to the Xylarian body and mind, yet they had something Lyra could not name. Some called it resilience, others called it unpredictability. Whatever it was, it intrigued her. She had seen records of their history, their wars, their rise from a small blue planet to reach out into the stars. It was surprising that such a species, so seemingly weak, could challenge the might of even one Xylarian ship. Ethan was late. A minor inconvenience, Lyra told herself, though she felt a faint irritation. The human finally arrived, escorted by a small contingent of guards. At first glance, he seemed exactly what she expected. A common human, tall but not imposing, average features, and a calm, almost unremarkable demeanor. But the moment his eyes met hers, there was a spark of intelligence, curiosity, and subtle confidence that caused her heart to skip. It was dangerous, she realized, for someone to hold such a quiet power under the guise of ordinary appearance. "Your Majesty," Ethan said, bowing slightly. His voice was steady, calm, and pleasant to her ears. It carried no fear, only respect. "It is an honor to be here on Aurelia Prime." Lyra raised an eyebrow, her usual composure unshaken. "You speak well for a human." "Many of your kind fumble with words when faced with Xylarian authority," he smiled faintly. "Perhaps they do not meet someone as patient as you, Your Majesty." She felt the corners of her mouth twitch. A human who could amuse her, who could meet her wit with clever words, that was rare. She allowed a small nod. "Very well, walk with me. There is much to discuss." As they moved through the palace corridors, Lyra noticed Ethan observing everything. Not just the ornate architecture or the soldiers stationed along the walls, but the details no one else seemed to notice. The alignment of the guards, the tiny weaknesses in the palace defense, the subtle patterns in the movement of the servants. It was almost imperceptible, but it made her uneasy. Humans were fragile, yes, but some of them had minds sharper than any Xylarian. Perhaps this one was such a mind. The formal meetings went smoothly. Discussions of trade, diplomacy, and alliances were conducted with efficiency and courtesy. Ethan never faltered, answering every question with calm precision. But during a break, Lyra noticed something unusual. He had wandered to the balcony overlooking the city and had picked up a strange alien artifact from the ledge, a ceremonial blade, purely decorative, and examined it carefully. "Fascinating," he murmured, turning it over in his hands. Lyra approached silently. "You do not know its significance," she said. "That is a sacred object of our ancestors. It is not a toy for a human hand." Ethan looked up, his expression calm, even amused. "I am aware, Your Majesty. I do not intend to disrespect it. I merely observe its design. The weight, the balance, it is ingenious." Lyra studied him, sensing something beneath the surface she could not yet grasp. "You are curious, perhaps too curious for a human." "Curiosity is what drives humans forward," Ethan said simply. "It is how we survive, adapt, and thrive. Perhaps you will see it as a weakness, but it has kept us alive when more powerful species underestimated us." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. He spoke as if he had faced danger far greater than any human should survive, and yet here he was, calm, composed, and unafraid. There was a fire within him that she had not seen in other humans. She felt an unfamiliar tension stir in her chest. Days passed, and Ethan's presence in the palace became more familiar. He attended ceremonies, observed military exercises, and engaged in endless discussions about human and Xylarian technology. Lyra began to enjoy his company, drawn to his humility, wit, and quiet confidence. It was dangerous to feel admiration for a human, but she could not help herself. The marriage proposal came unexpectedly. A suggestion from the council, intended as a political maneuver, had been made in jest initially, but Lyra found herself seriously considering it. If she married this human, it could strengthen diplomatic ties with Earth and signal unity between their species. And perhaps, she admitted silently, it was time for a challenge, someone to truly test her perceptions and assumptions. The wedding was a grand affair. Crystal spires reflected the twin sons of Oralia Prime as citizens and dignitaries from across the galaxy gathered. Ethan looked every bit the human he seemed, modest, calm, yet his eyes betrayed intelligence, strength, and unspoken potential. Lyra wore her ceremonial regalia, a crown of shimmering alloys and rare gems, her posture regal and commanding. And yet, as she approached the altar, she felt a flutter of curiosity about this human she had wed, not out of pity nor obligation, but genuine interest. After the ceremony, the palace settled into a quiet routine. Ethan moved through his new role with grace, attending meetings, observing, and learning. Lyra expected him to be overwhelmed, but he seemed to adapt to Zalarian life with surprising ease. Yet there were moments that made her doubt the simplicity of his character, times when he disappeared for hours, returning with a calm, composed expression as if he had been somewhere most humans could not survive. One afternoon, while walking through the palace gardens, Lyra noticed him practicing. At first, she thought he was stretching, perhaps exercising to maintain human fitness. But soon she realized he was practicing movements with alien weaponry, blades and staffs, fluid, precise, and almost graceful. Lyra's eyes widened. Humans were not known for their combat ability against a Xylarian, much less mastering their weapons so quickly. "You have a strange way of training," she said, her tone neutral but edged with curiosity. Ethan stopped, bowing slightly. "I believe it is prudent to be prepared, Your Majesty. While I do not seek conflict, it is wise to understand the strengths of those around me." Observation alone is not enough. Lyra studied him. Here was a human who was neither weak nor unprepared, a human who had a mind capable of anticipating movement, reading intent, and adapting instinctively. It unsettled her in ways she had not expected. "You are not an ordinary human," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "I have never claimed to be," Ethan replied, his calm eyes meeting hers. "Perhaps humans appear ordinary to others, but those who study us closely often find surprises." Lyra felt a mix of admiration and caution. There was a subtle danger in underestimating him. She had ruled the Xylar Dominion with unmatched strength and intelligence, yet she sensed that this human could challenge even her expectations. As the weeks passed, rumors began to spread throughout the palace. Servants whispered of the human consort who survived situations no human should endure. Guards noticed him moving with skill and precision that rivaled Xylarian soldiers. Advisors debated whether Lyra had made a grave mistake in marrying him. One evening, while reviewing diplomatic communications, Lyra found herself reflecting on Ethan. He was patient, clever, and calm, yet there was a quiet strength beneath the surface. She realized that her fascination with him was not mere curiosity. She was beginning to respect him, perhaps even trust him with matters she had never entrusted to anyone before. And that realization both thrilled and terrified her. Ethan, meanwhile, observed the palace with quiet attention. He had come to Oralia Prime as an ambassador, but he was learning more than diplomacy. He was learning the Xylarians themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears, and their arrogance. Every moment in the palace was an opportunity to gather knowledge, to understand a civilization that believed itself unmatched. And perhaps, he thought quietly, it was time to let them see that humans were far from powerless. The first part of the story ends with Lyra stepping onto her balcony one night, looking out over the glowing city. She sees Ethan standing a few feet behind her, calm and unassuming. The twin moons of Oralia Prime cast silver light across his features, and for the first time, she truly sees him, not as a human, not as a consort, but as someone far more capable than she had ever imagined. "Tell me," she says quietly, her voice tinged with curiosity and caution, "what are you hiding, Ethan Kane?" He turns, a faint smile on his lips, calm and confident. "Nothing, Your Majesty. Only the strength of a human who has learned to survive in a galaxy that believes he cannot." Lyra studies him, realizing that the ordinary appearance she had assumed was just that, an appearance. Beneath it lay intelligence, skill, and an unyielding will that could rival any Xylarian. She does not yet know the full extent of his abilities, but a shiver of anticipation runs down her spine. The human she thought she had wed as a commoner is not what he seems, and the realization fills her with a mix of admiration, caution, and a thrill she has not felt in centuries. Unseen in the shadows of the palace garden, a group of alien spies watches Ethan. They whisper among themselves, convinced that the human is weak, unaware that the strength they do not see may soon shake the very foundations of the Xylar dominion. The first threads of intrigue, danger, and revelation are set in motion, and Aurelia Prime is about to witness events that will challenge every assumption about humanity, power, and the thin line between appearance and reality. And as Lyra turns back toward the palace halls, she cannot shake the growing sense that she has not married a common human at all, but something far greater, far more formidable, and far more extraordinary than anyone on Aurelia Prime could have imagined. Days passed in the palace, and the rhythm of life continued as usual, or at least, it seemed usual to those who looked only at appearances. The citizens of Aurelia Prime admired their queen's composure and marveled at the presence of the human consort. Yet few suspected that beneath Ethan's calm exterior, a storm of observation, calculation, and preparation was quietly unfolding. Lyra found herself watching him more often than she would admit. He moved with quiet confidence, blending seamlessly into the routines of the palace, attending diplomatic functions, observing military drills, and engaging in conversation with scholars, strategists, and visitors alike. Every gesture, every word seemed carefully measured. Yet despite this composure, there was a tension about him that no one could fully read. One morning, Lyra arrived at the training grounds to find Ethan practicing alone. His movements were precise, almost fluid, each motion deliberate and efficient. He wielded a Xylarian training blade with skill that startled her. While she had expected him to struggle at first, the ease with which he manipulated the weapon left her uneasy. "You practice often," she said, stepping closer. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness beneath it. Ethan paused, lowering the blade respectfully. "It is prudent, Your Majesty. Understanding the tools of those around you and how to defend oneself is never a waste of time." Lyra observed him closely, her mind racing. Humans were not known to wield Xylarian weapons effectively, much less with such precision. He seemed ordinary, yet here was evidence that he was anything but. The realization unsettled her. "You have not yet told me why you are so capable," she said, a note of curiosity in her tone. "I have always believed that appearances are deceiving," Ethan replied simply. "Judging someone by what is visible is a mistake. Strength, intelligence, and skill often lie beneath the surface." Before Lyra could respond, an urgent alarm echoed through the palace. The council chambers had reported unusual activity near the outer perimeter. A group of alien mercenaries had attempted to infiltrate the city, hoping to kidnap high-ranking officials and embarrass the queen. Panic and fear spread among the staff, but Ethan's expression remained calm. "Stay here," he instructed Lyra, though he did not raise his voice. "I will handle this." Lyra wanted to protest, to insist that he stay safe, but she could only watch as he moved with astonishing speed and coordination. He assessed the attackers, predicting their movements before they made them. Guards attempted to engage, but Ethan's tactical insight allowed him to redirect the battle, minimizing casualties while neutralizing the threat. By the time the intruders were captured, the council was in awe. Whispers filled the chambers. A human, commanding the situation as if he were born for it, had turned what could have been disaster into a display of precision and control. Lyra's pride in him was tempered by a realization she could not ignore. She had underestimated the true power of the human she had married. In the days that followed, Ethan continued to study the Xylarian military, learning the strengths and weaknesses of their strategy, formations, and hierarchy. He spent long hours in the archives, reading about battles, campaigns, and tactics used by the Xylarians for centuries. It was not enough for him to survive. He intended to understand, adapt, and ultimately outthink any challenge that came their way. The alien council grew uneasy. Rumors spread of a human who could read Xylarian strategy like an open book, who could anticipate movements and reactions before they happened. Some whispered that Lyra had made a mistake, marrying someone who was perhaps too clever, too capable for his own good. Yet they could not deny that Ethan's loyalty to the queen and the palace was unwavering. Every act, every decision reinforced his intelligence and foresight. One evening, a messenger arrived with urgent news. A coalition of rebel Xylarians, angry at the queen's marriage to a human and fearful of his growing influence, had begun mobilizing outside the city. The rebels believed that a human consort would be weak and easily overpowered, a symbol of the queen's folly. They intended to strike at the palace, to demonstrate that the Xylarians would not tolerate such an alliance. Lyra's initial response was one of concern. She knew the rebels were formidable, highly trained, and ruthless. Yet Ethan's expression remained calm. He approached the council chambers, studying maps and battle reports, analyzing troop movements, and calculating the enemy's likely strategy. "They underestimate us," he said quietly, yet with certainty. "Their arrogance will be their weakness. If we anticipate their moves, we can control the battlefield before they even reach the gates." Lyra was both impressed and alarmed. She had expected a human to falter under pressure, yet here was one who not only remained calm but outthought seasoned Xylarian strategists. The night before the expected attack, Ethan moved through the palace like a shadow. He inspected defenses, coordinated with the guards, and adjusted plans based on subtle observations the Xylarians had overlooked. He noticed weak points in the outer walls, gaps in patrol rotations, and predictable patterns in the enemy's past behavior. Each insight was relayed to the guards with quiet authority, and they followed his instructions without question. The next morning, the rebels arrived, confident in their ability to overwhelm the palace. Their ships descended, and soldiers poured onto the outer perimeter. Yet the moment they engaged, Ethan's preparations became evident. Traps were triggered, reinforcements arrived precisely where needed, and the rebels found themselves facing a defense they had not anticipated. Lyra watched from the balcony, heart pounding, as Ethan moved through the battlefield with uncanny precision. He directed the guards, anticipated enemy maneuvers, and neutralized threats before they could escalate. The rebels were skilled, but their overconfidence and underestimation of the human consort led to chaos in their ranks. At one point, a squad of elite mercenaries managed to breach the outer wall, intending to strike at the queen herself. Ethan intercepted them, moving with a speed and skill that stunned even Lyra. He disarmed one attacker, incapacitated another with calculated strikes, and used their own momentum against them. Within moments, the threat was neutralized, leaving the intruders confused and disoriented. By midday, the rebellion had faltered. The human who had been dismissed as ordinary had turned the tide, ensuring the palace remained secure with minimal casualties. The council who had doubted him now regarded him with a mixture of fear, respect, and disbelief. Lyra, however, felt something deeper: pride, awe, and a realization that she had married someone whose strength transcended the limits she had imagined. After the battle, Ethan returned to the Queen's chambers. He was calm, composed, and almost serene, as if the chaos of the morning had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Lyra approached him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of emotions. "You were extraordinary," she said quietly. I did not expect this from a human." Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "You judged by appearances, Your Majesty. That is natural. Humans often appear weaker than they are, but we survive, adapt, and overcome. That is our strength." Lyra's mind raced. She had always believed in the superiority of the Xylarians, in their intelligence, strength, and tactical brilliance. Yet here was a human who had outperformed even her most skilled strategists, who had defended the palace with a level of skill and insight that was rare among Xylarian elites. She felt both humbled and intrigued. The Queen's reflection on the morning's events was interrupted by an encrypted message. It arrived from a source unknown, containing coordinates and warnings of a larger threat approaching the system. Ethan examined it carefully, noting subtle patterns in the message's encryption that suggested careful planning and strategic insight. "This is no ordinary attack," he said. "Someone is watching, learning, and preparing. The forces we faced today were merely scouts, testing our defenses. A greater challenge is coming." Lyra's unease grew. She had faced threats before, but the idea that someone might anticipate their every move, using intelligence and cunning rather than brute force, was troubling. Yet she found reassurance in Ethan's presence. His calm, unshakable demeanor, combined with his clear understanding of strategy, gave her confidence she had not felt in years. Over the following days, Ethan worked tirelessly to prepare the palace and the city. He trained guards in unconventional tactics, improved communication networks, and developed contingency plans for multiple scenarios. He moved quietly without fanfare, yet every action reinforced the reality of his abilities. The Alien Council, once skeptical, began to acknowledge his skill. Advisors who had doubted his loyalty or capacity now sought his input, recognizing that the human consort was more than a symbol. He was a capable, intelligent, and adaptable strategist. Lyra observed these shifts with fascination. Her human, whom she had once believed ordinary, was quietly reshaping perceptions, not through arrogance or violence, but through competence, insight, and quiet authority. One evening, as they walked together through the palace gardens, Lyra broke the silence. "You are unlike any human I have ever known. You think differently, act differently, and yet you are still human." Ethan smiled faintly. "Humanity is underestimated. We appear ordinary, fragile, or weak, yet our strength lies in our adaptability, intelligence, and resilience. Others often see only what is visible, not what lies beneath the surface." Lyra nodded, considering his words. She realized that she had married not a simple human, but a being whose depth, skill, and insight could challenge the mightiest of Xylarians. And as much as it unsettled her, it also fascinated her. The final nights of Part 2 were marked by tension and anticipation. Scouts reported movement on distant planets. Signals intercepted from unknown sources suggested intelligence far beyond the human or Xylarian norm. Lyra and Ethan spent hours planning, preparing, and predicting the moves of unseen adversaries. As the twin suns of Oralia Prime set, casting long shadows over the crystal towers, Ethan stood beside the Queen, gazing at the horizon. His expression was calm, resolute, and confident. "They believe humans are weak," he said softly. "Soon they will learn the truth. Not through luck, not through chance, but through strategy, insight, and the strength of those they underestimate." Lyra felt a surge of respect and awe. The human she had once thought ordinary had revealed a part of himself that few, if any, could have predicted. And she understood, more clearly than ever, that appearances were deceiving, and that humanity's true power was only beginning to show. Unseen in the distance, fleets of unknown ships prepared to move, scouts reported anomalies, and whispers of rebellion and intelligence reached the palace walls. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only the skill and strength of Xylarians, but the underestimated might of a human who had quietly mastered what others thought impossible. Lyra looked at Ethan, her mind racing. This human, her human, was no longer simply a consort. He was a protector, a strategist, and a force that even the most powerful aliens could not ignore. And as the night fell, she understood that Oralia Prime, and perhaps the galaxy itself, was on the brink of discovering what humans were truly capable of. The city of Oralia Prime was unusually quiet as dawn broke over the crystal towers. The twin suns glinted off the polished spires, painting the streets in gold and silver. Yet beneath the serene beauty, tension pulsed through every corridor, every hall, and every watchtower. Ethan Kane stood in the council chambers, studying the maps and reports spread before him. The previous encounters had been only a taste of what was coming. The scouts had been testing, probing defenses, measuring strength. Now the real threat approached. Lyra entered silently, observing him. She had learned to trust his judgment, to follow his instincts, even when the council and her advisors doubted him. Her heart still raced when she saw him at work, the calm, composed human whose mind worked with a precision that rivaled the most brilliant Xylarians. "They are coming," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension. "The larger fleet, how many do you estimate?" Ethan's gaze did not leave the maps. "Enough to challenge us, but not enough to overwhelm completely. Their strategy is cautious. They do not understand the full capacity of what they face. That is our advantage." Lyra nodded, feeling a mix of fear and admiration. "And the palace defenses? Improved, guards trained, traps ready. Our advantage is coordination and adaptability. They rely on brute strength and numbers. We rely on precision and understanding." The first sign of the incoming fleet appeared on the horizon in the mid-morning light. Sleek alien vessels, larger than anything the Xylarians had faced before, moved in formation. Their shapes were angular, almost menacing, reflecting the sunlight like sharp blades cutting across the sky. The council panicked, some shouting orders to mobilize the fleet. Lyra stood silently, her hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder, watching his calm reaction. "They believe the human is weak," one advisor muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Do they not see what happened before?" Ethan's voice was calm, almost gentle, as he responded. "They think human weakness is predictable." They do not understand that adaptability is not visible, that strategy is not brute force, and that courage can change the outcome. As the alien ships entered firing range, Ethan activated the palace defense systems. Energy barriers hummed to life along the outer walls, defensive drones soared into the sky, and automated turrets powered up with precision targeting. Every element of the defense had been refined based on his observations, predicting how the attackers would move. The first volleys of plasma fire streaked across the sky, clashing against the shields. The attackers had expected to overwhelm easily, but they were met with resistance coordinated with uncanny precision. Turrets moved as if guided by intuition, drones intercepted projectiles mid-flight, and energy fields absorbed the brunt of the assault. Lyra watched as Ethan moved through the command center, giving concise instructions, adjusting strategies in real time. He was calm, almost serene, while the council around him shouted, panicked, or froze in indecision. His mind worked faster than any computer, calculating trajectories, predicting enemy decisions, and orchestrating the defense like a symphony. Yet the attackers adapted quickly, attempting to flank and penetrate the palace perimeter. Ethan anticipated each maneuver. He sent specialized Zalarian units to intercept, using decoy tactics that lured the enemy into traps. With every move, the attackers' confidence faltered. They had expected an easy victory, but they were facing a strategist who understood both Zalarians and humans, who could exploit arrogance, rigidity, and misjudgment. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched Ethan personally take command of a section of the outer defense. He moved with speed and skill, directing units, neutralizing threats, and even engaging enemy soldiers directly when necessary. His combat ability was unlike any human or Zalarian she had ever seen. Every strike, every movement was precise, calculated, and effective. The battle continued throughout the day, the sun rising high and casting sharp shadows across the city. The attackers' numbers were greater, their ships faster, but Ethan's foresight, adaptability, and tactical genius kept the palace secure. He used a combination of technology, psychology, and human ingenuity that the aliens could not predict. By mid-afternoon, the enemy realized they had underestimated the human consort. Their formations had broken, their units were scattered, and morale was faltering. Some of the alien commanders began to retreat, only to find that Ethan had anticipated such a move, cutting off escape routes and forcing surrender without unnecessary destruction. Lyra moved among the troops and advisors, observing how Ethan's calm presence inspired confidence. Soldiers who had doubted themselves now followed his instructions without hesitation. Zylarian strategists who had dismissed him now looked to him for guidance. She realized that he was not just defending the palace, he was reshaping the very perception of humanity within the Xylar Dominion. As evening fell, the battle reached its climax. The largest enemy vessel descended toward the palace with the intention of striking at the heart of Aurelia Prime. Ethan calmly coordinated a multi-layered defense. Drones, turrets, and elite Zalarian squads worked in perfect synchronization, each action anticipating the next. Lyra's heart raced as she saw Ethan move toward the front lines, engaging enemy forces directly. He wielded alien weapons with skill that defied expectation, using their momentum, patterns, and mistakes against them. Within moments, the vessel's assault had been neutralized, its weapons disabled, and its soldiers captured or scattered. The city had survived, the palace remained intact, and the attackers were forced to retreat. The council was speechless, some in awe, others in fear. Lyra approached Ethan as he returned, unscathed, calm, and resolute. "You have done what I thought impossible," she said softly. "Not through brute force alone, but through strategy, intelligence, and courage. Humans, you are far stronger than I ever imagined." Ethan's eyes met hers, calm yet intense. "Strength is not always visible, Your Majesty. Humans survive through adaptation, through learning, and through using every advantage that others overlook. That is how we thrive, even among species far stronger than ourselves." Lyra studied him, realizing fully for the first time that she had never married an ordinary human. He was a strategist, a warrior, and a mind that could match any Zalarian elite. She felt pride, awe, and an unfamiliar thrill. Humanity, which she had once underestimated, had proven itself capable of extraordinary feats. That night, as the city celebrated its survival, Ethan and Lyra walked together through the gardens. The stars above Aurelia Prime shone like diamonds, and the twin moons reflected softly across the palace grounds. "Do you ever tire of this constant danger?" Lyra asked, her voice quiet. Ethan shook his head. "Challenges are what make life meaningful. Humans are tested constantly. Our species thrives not because we are the strongest, but because we adapt, endure, and learn. This galaxy, it has not seen the full strength of humanity yet." Lyra smiled faintly, feeling a deep respect and trust in him. "I underestimated you. I believed humans were fragile, weak, predictable. You have shown me that I was wrong. That strength comes in many forms, and humanity's strength is remarkable." Ethan looked out toward the horizon, his expression calm but thoughtful. "This is only the beginning. There are others who will challenge us, others who will doubt humans. But we will continue to survive, adapt, and prove that strength is not always measured in brute force. It is measured in courage, intelligence, and the will to endure." In the following days, the council convened to discuss the aftermath. Alien leaders, once skeptical, now recognized the value of the human consort. They acknowledged that intelligence, adaptability, and strategy could rival raw strength. Lyra's decision to marry Ethan was no longer questioned. It was celebrated as a demonstration of foresight and wisdom. Ethan, however, remained humble. He worked quietly, strengthening alliances, preparing defenses, and ensuring the city's stability. He taught the Zalarians to see beyond appearances, to respect unpredictability, and to value courage and ingenuity. The galaxy, he knew, would soon witness the full potential of humanity, and they would not underestimate it again. Weeks later, a new message arrived, this time from distant stars beyond Aurelia Prime system. Observers had reported fleets gathering, curious about the recent events on the planet. Yet the news spread quickly. A human had defended the Queen, outwitted alien commanders, and survived against impossible odds. Stories of Ethan Kane's actions spread across systems, reaching planets that had never thought humans could be a factor in galactic affairs. Lyra watched as humans began to be seen differently. No longer were they dismissed as weak, fragile, or ordinary. Their ingenuity, resilience, and courage were becoming known, earning respect and even fear from species that had underestimated them for centuries. And at the center of it all was Ethan, calm, intelligent, and ready to lead when necessary. One evening, as they watched the stars together, Lyra turned to him. "You have changed the way they see humans. You have changed the way I see them. And I see you differently now than when we first married, not as a consort, not as a human, but as someone extraordinary." Ethan smiled faintly, his calm demeanor never faltering. "I am still human, but humanity is more than appearances. We endure, we adapt, and we overcome. That is the truth that others are finally beginning to see." Lyra placed her hand on his. "And I will stand with you not because you are strong, but because you are human, and because your strength is something the galaxy will never forget." As they stood together beneath the twin moons, Aurelia Prime peaceful once more, a sense of possibility filled the air. Humans, once underestimated and dismissed, were now recognized as capable, resilient, and formidable. And the man who had quietly revealed their true strength stood beside the Queen, ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. Far beyond Aurelia Prime, other species watched, wondering how such a seemingly ordinary human could achieve so much. Some felt fear, others admiration, but all began to realize that the era of underestimating humanity was over. And in the quiet of the palace, Ethan Kane and Queen Lyra stood together, a symbol of unity, courage, and the extraordinary potential of humans. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a new power, and it would never again dismiss the human race.